7 years ago, I made a tutorial on egg pasta, and it turned out to be the biggest success of my YouTube career. My goal was to help people make a great pasta on their first try. And based on thousands of success stories that I received in the comments, I think it worked. But it's time for a remake. First of all, in 7 years, I learned a thing or two. Second of all, many viewers wrote to me with great questions. How do you control the width of the pasta ribbon? How do you prevent the finished pasta from sticking? How do you par-cook the sheets for lasagna? And so many more. I wanted to answer all these questions in a way that would benefit all viewers, not just the person asking. So may I present to you Pasta 2.0. My philosophy is still the same. I'm not a pasta granny. I'm only Helen Rennie. Unless you've been making pasta for 80 years, you need accurate measurements and clear instructions. Let's start with the flour. You'll hear a lot of talk about 00 flour. What is it, and do we need it? Usually, you'll hear 00 described as a flour that's very finely ground. That's a gross simplification. In the US, our primary way to classify flour is by protein content. Cake flour has very low protein. Bread flour has a lot of protein. All-purpose flour is in the middle. In Italy, the primary way to classify flour is the ash content and the grind. Here is how to think about the ash content. A wheat kernel is made up of 3 main components: the germ, the bran, and the endosperm. If the germ and the bran are sifted out, you get a very white flour. If you were to burn it, it would produce very little ash because most of the minerals that can't burn off are in the germ and the bran. If the bran and the germ are not sifted out, the flour would produce more ash. Basically, low ash is white, high ash is whole wheat. In the US, it's either white or whole wheat. In Italy, it's a spectrum. Another thing the system tells you is the grind. 00 is very fine and integrale is very coarse. Within the category of 00 flour, there are many levels of protein. You could buy 00 flour that's low, medium, or high protein. For pasta, we want high. That's what gives it that great chew. Unfortunately, that is very hard, if not impossible, to find in an American store. 00 flour you'll typically see sold will be all-purpose, and it won't perform any better than King Arthur unbleached all-purpose flour. I'm not saying it won't be different. It will be a bit smoother, but it won't have that fabulous chew that you expect from great pasta. In my last video, I recommended that you order Caputo 00 pasta flour on Amazon. Its high protein content produces exceptional pasta texture. But now I know a much cheaper and easier option that's equally good. Just buy King Arthur bread flour. It has a similar protein content and produces fantastic pasta. In a blind taste test, none of my family members were able to tell the difference between King Arthur bread and Caputo pasta flour. Flour is a powder. It's compressible. If you want to measure it with cups, you might as well measure it with handfuls. Eggs labeled large can be as little as 54 grams and as big as 70 grams. If you are a pasta granny, just dump stuff on the counter and go for it. But for the rest of us, here are the measurements. 300 grams of bread flour, 185 grams of wet ingredients. Here's how to assemble them. Set up a cup on a scale and zero it out. Add 2 large eggs. Don't zero out the scale. Add 3 large yolks. Again, don't zero out the scale and add enough water until you reach 185 grams. Wet things are heavy, so pour slowly. Done! Put the flour into a food processor. Add 1 teaspoon of table or 2 teaspoons of Diamond Crystal Kosher salt. Don't use Morton's kosher. There is a lot of controversy about salt in pasta dough. Some people add it and some don't. I tried it both ways and I much prefer the salted dough. Fresh pasta cooks so briefly that it's hard to correct its blandness during cooking. I do salt my cooking water very heavily, but I also want some salt in the dough. Run the processor for 5 seconds to integrate the salt. Add all the wet ingredients and run the processor until no dry flour remains. In other words, no dry powdery stuff. Depending on the size of your processor and the size of your batch, you might get one big clump or lots of crumbs. Any texture is fine at this point. I often get a question about making a double batch. My food processor is 14 cups. It can handle a double batch. In a smaller processor, you could run 2 regular batches separately and then knead them together. If the dough feels stuck, you can rearrange the clumps and process a little longer. All I want at this stage is to not see white streaks of flour. If you don't have a food processor, you can bring the wet and the dry ingredients together in a stand mixer fitted with a dough hook. If you're using a mixer, put the wet ingredients into your bowl before the flour. This will speed up the mixing. Get all this mess out onto your counter. It doesn't need to be wood or marble, it just needs to be flat and clean. Shake out all the flour stuck inside the blade. Clean the blade with a pastry scraper or a spatula. Scrape out the sides and bottom of the processor. We want to keep all the ingredients. We measured them carefully and we don't want to leave any behind. Work your dough for a minute before making a decision on adjustments. It will feel a bit wet when it first comes out, but in about a minute it will settle down. So don't even think about adding more flour until you've been kneading for a full minute. Okay, our dough is doing great. All the stickiness is gone. But if it was sticking to the counter after the first minute of kneading, I would knead in about 1 tablespoon of flour. Wait for it to get completely absorbed and then decide if I need even more flour. Even though we measured all the ingredients carefully, humidity will vary, so minor adjustments might be necessary. Kneading pasta dough is very different from bread dough. Pasta dough is tough. It won't cooperate if you try to fold it all the way in half and rotate 90 degrees on each turn. Fold just a small amount of dough towards you. It should reach just past the middle of your dough. Press and rotate the dough slightly. Fold, press, rotate. All the motions are a lot smaller with pasta dough than with bread dough. The goal here is to very gradually wrap the dough around itself, which will develop gluten and elasticity. The top of your dough should form a spiral pattern and the bottom should be smooth. You can help yourself fold by standing up the dough at roughly 45 degrees. Fold, press, rotate. Stand it back up and press. Up and press. If you find the dough too stiff, you can always wrap it up in plastic for 15 minutes and wait for it to hydrate more thoroughly before continuing to knead. That will make it feel slightly softer. Let me show you kneading from this side. You might get a better view of what's happening. The bottom of your dough should be smooth. If your dough looks rough underneath, you might be smearing it too hard or grabbing it with your fingers while pressing down on it. When you press down, make sure your fingertips are up. How do you know when your dough is kneaded enough? For bread dough, you can do a window pane test where you stretch it into a very thin membrane. Pasta dough is too firm for that kind of test, so I just go by time. Once my dough is out of the food processor, I set my timer for 8 minutes. You can't over-knead pasta dough, so if it's your first time and you have never kneaded anything before in your life, go for 10 minutes of kneading, since it might take you a few minutes to become productive. Can you knead pasta dough in a mixer? It depends. If you have a C-hook, no. The ball of dough just gets whacked around. If you have a spiral hook, it can knead for you, but produces a dough that's a tad too soft. If possible, I would give it a few minutes of hand kneading towards the end. When you're done kneading, sprinkle the dough with flour on both sides, wrap tightly in plastic, and let it rest for at least 30 minutes at room temperature. This will relax the gluten and prevent the dough from shrinking when you try to get it to that 1 millimeter thickness. If you are not ready to roll after 30 minutes, no worries. Just keep your dough at room temperature until you're ready, as long as you roll it out the same day you make it. Okay, so this dough is intended for rolling into exceptionally thin sheets. It will not work for orecchiette, cavatelli, and other hand shapes because the eggs make it too firm. Thicker pasta shapes are made with water dough, which makes them softer. I have a video on water-based pasta dough, the link is below, but today we need some sort of machine to produce thin sheets. If you have a stand mixer, you can buy a pasta roller for it. It's a joy to use. If you don't have a stand mixer, buy a hand crank machine that attaches to your table. The links for both are below. A quick note for KitchenAid users, you want to set your mixer to a fairly low speed like 2 for using your rolling attachment. The first step in working with egg pasta dough is lamination. This gets people confused. They expect to start thinning out the dough right away. Technically, you could do that, but if you want a good shape and a good texture, you need to laminate your dough. In other words, fold it repeatedly. This accomplishes 3 things. It develops more gluten, it reduces sticking, and it shapes your dough into a nice rectangle that will eventually roll out to a nice wide ribbon. Divide your dough into 4 parts. Wrap whatever parts you're not currently working with tightly in plastic to prevent them from drying. Flour the dough liberally and evenly. Roll it out with a rolling pin to the thickness of a pancake. Set your machine to the first setting, that's the thickest one, and feed the dough through. If it refuses to catch in the rollers, squeeze the edge to make it thinner and try again. Fold the dough like a ladder into thirds. Flatten it out, reflour it, and roll it with a pin. Make sure to roll all the way through very firmly to seal the ends. Feed it through the machine again, starting with one of the open edges. We're still on the first setting. Let's flour the dough again. You really can't overdo the flour. By the way, do not fold the dough like this to get a wider ribbon. It will result in uneven thickness. I'll show you how to control the width of your ribbon in a minute. For now, it's not important. I do this folding process 3 to 4 times. Before your very last fold, you need to start worrying about the width. If your package is very narrow, you will get a narrow ribbon, which is not ideal for lasagna or using a ravioli tray. To get a wider package, you need to start with a longer ribbon. How do you get a longer ribbon? You can set your machine to a thinner setting. Here's setting 2. It's a little longer. Here's setting 3. It's even longer. Now I can get a really nice wide dough package. It should be roughly 4 inches wide. Roll it thoroughly, sealing both ends. Flour it evenly, and now we can move on to the thinning step. Just don't forget to reset the machine to setting 1. Anytime you fold the dough, its thickness triples, and you need to start on the widest possible setting. Before we thin out the dough, here are some troubleshooting tips for the lamination stage. If your dough comes out bumpy or ripped, it's usually due to one of 3 problems. Problem 1, your dough is sticky or partially sticky. Make sure you flour it very evenly before putting it through the rollers. Problem 2, your dough is too thick. Every time you fold it, make sure to roll it out very well with a pin and seal all the ends. And problem 3, you forgot to reset your machine to the first setting. Every time you finish the pasta sheet, you'll end up on the 6th setting. Or maybe you wanted a wider dough package and went up to setting 3 before your final fold. Make sure to go back to setting 1. But if you forgot and your dough got shredded, don't panic. Smoosh it together, wrap it up, and let it rest while working on the other pieces. Then re-roll that troublemaker. Clear about 3 feet of counter space for your finished pasta sheet. I know, it looks small, but it will become huge. Put your dough through setting 1, then 2, then 3. One more tip, once your dough gets caught by the rollers, stop holding it and move your hand to the bottom of the machine to catch it. Letting it drape over the back of the machine helps it stretch out. Around setting 4, you might want to flour your dough one last time if there is even a hint of stickiness. Mine is not sticky at all, so I'll keep on rolling. Setting 5 and setting 6. 6 is my final setting. Ta-da! We made pasta. Drape this ribbon over one of your wrists, sprinkle the counter with rice flour, and place the ribbon on top. Why rice flour? Because from here on we have to avoid sticking like the plague, and rice flour is way better at this task than wheat flour. If you live in a very humid area and encounter sticking with rice flour, make a mix of half rice flour and half cornstarch. If you are planning to fill the pasta, do not get any flour on top of the ribbon. It needs to retain slight stickiness so that you can seal your ravioli, tortellini, or whatever shape you are making. Go ahead and fill this ribbon immediately. It will dry up by the time you roll out the rest of the dough. If you are cutting the pasta into ribbons, you want to sprinkle both sides with rice flour and hang this ribbon to let it dry ever so slightly, about 10 minutes or until it feels like your skin. It should still be completely pliable but no longer tacky. Be careful not to dry it too much or it will crack. If the edges start to get crisp, that's not good. I use a clothes hanger for this task. While it's drying, laminate and roll your next piece of dough. Although most pasta sets include a cutting attachment, I prefer to cut my pasta with a knife because it gives me full control of the width. Put the pasta on a cutting board and roll it up to the center from both directions. Slice with a knife into whatever width you want. If the edges are uneven, you can trim them a little. Then slide the back of your knife between the two roll-ups, lift it up and let the pasta unroll. If it doesn't unroll easily, next time wait for it to dry a bit more and use more rice flour. Make sure to straighten out all the ends. I was so focused on making a pretty pasta nest for the picture that I forgot to cut my ribbons in half. Don't make my mistake. Cut them in half so that they are easier to eat. Otherwise, you twirl and twirl with your fork and never get to the end of the ribbon. 10 to 12 inches is a good length. 2 feet is too long. Form the ribbons into little nests and place on a parchment-lined baking sheet. To cook fresh pasta, you need a lot of water. For 4 portions, you'll need an 8-quart pot. A covered pot will come to a boil a lot faster, but a covered pot with salt will boil over unless you catch the right moment to remove the lid. Since I want my water to boil quickly but not boil over, I add the salt after the water is almost boiling, and after that I wait for the boil without covering the pot. Fresh pasta cooks in 1 minute. 2 minutes tops. It doesn't get a chance to absorb a lot of water the way dry pasta does. So the water needs to be insanely salty. If you cringe when you taste it, you got it right. Homemade lasagna is a major undertaking. Not only do you need to roll out all the sheets, but you need to par-cook them before assembling your masterpiece. If you use them raw, they'll have a truly disgusting texture when cooked. kind of like hot gum. To par-cook the sheets, set up a bowl with ice water next to your pot. Add 1 sheet of pasta at a time to the boiling water. Let it cook for 20 seconds. Fish it out with a spider spoon and place in the ice water. When all the sheets are cooked, dry them well on paper towels and assemble your lasagna. Before we cook our pasta, let's make a quick sauce. Set a small pot over high heat. For every portion of pasta, add a 1/4 cup of heavy cream and bring it to a boil, swirling the pot occasionally. Reduce the heat to medium. Add 2 teaspoons of freshly squeezed lemon juice and a generous pinch of salt. I use 1/2 teaspoon of Diamond Crystal Kosher or a 1/4 teaspoon of table salt. Here is what's cool about this sauce. Lemon juice does not just make it brighter. Its acidity thickens the cream. Keep simmering your sauce until it thickens slightly. Take the pot off heat and add a handful of grated Parmesan and 1 tablespoon of butter per portion. Mix them in until they melt, then taste and correct for salt. And add any desired flavorings. Today I'll just add chives, but cooked leeks would be lovely too. If you're cooking more than 1 portion, I would strongly suggest using a strainer that goes straight into your pot. This way you can easily get all the pasta in and out. I wouldn't drain fresh pasta in a colander. The flour I use to prevent sticking will settle on the bottom of the pot and will not hurt anyone if I just leave it there. But if I dump all this water into the colander, my pasta will be covered with the rice flour mush. Since I'm only cooking 1 portion today, I'll just use my handy dandy spider spoon. It holds a lot and drains well. Dump in the pasta, stir, cover just until you get the boil back. Set the timer for 1 minute. Taste to make sure your pasta is done and get it out. Mix thoroughly with the sauce of your choice and serve. If you're serving pasta the same day you make it, cover it and put in the fridge until you're ready to cook it. If you want to serve pasta the next day or any time in the future, freeze it. It will taste as good as new. Put the baking sheet with the pasta uncovered in the freezer just until it becomes hard, about 1 hour. Set a timer. If you forget about it, it will dehydrate. Move it into a Ziploc bag and store in the freezer. Technically, you can store it indefinitely, but it's best during the first month. Do not defrost the frozen pasta. Cook it from frozen. Noodles might need an extra minute or 2 to cook, and ravioli might need an extra 3 to 4 minutes. Here are more very detailed culinary tutorials for you to check out, and if you are ever in the Boston area, maybe I'll see you in one of my classes.